And welcome back to the Hot Lap, where we had the Las Vegas Grand Prix and it was a disaster for McLaren. Oh my gosh, I mean, poor old Lando Norris. He has been run through the ringer this year. He's got potentially one hand on the championship. When he leaves the track, he left early. Maybe he knew. And then plank wars happened. Then the DQ happened. Now Verstappen just 24 points away from becoming the world champion with 2 races and 1 sprint to go. It's still uphill, but let's just say it's not as steep as we once thought. So if you're a McLaren fan, I absolutely feel for you. I'll be having a glass of something for you guys, particularly you Lando Norris fans as well. Oscar Piastri probably did him a favour, but this was the original top 10 for Las Vegas. Verstappen first, then Norris, Russell, Oscar Piastri, Kimi Antonelli, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Isaac Hadjar, Nico Hülkenberg and Lewis Hamilton. Then the DQ happened, disqualified Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. We'll get into that in a bit. And we have the new top 10, which is Verstappen, Russell, Kimi Antonelli for your podium, then Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Isaac Hadjar, Nico Hülkenberg, Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, and Ollie Behrman. So well done, Max Verstappen, for winning that race. It was all about the start for him, getting into the lead in spite of Lando Norris's very Verstappen-esque, Schumacher-esque chop. He did his best to put Verstappen down. To be fair, I was actually, well done, Lando Norris. You've actually showed a bit of aggression for once. It did become unstuck, didn't it? He did become unstuck. He went too deep into the first corner. We'll have a quick clip if we can in a bit. But if you want your full race result, this was it. Max Verstappen wins by what ended up being 23.5 seconds, simply because we believe, not down to the plank way, but Lando Norris was running out of fuel. Yeah. And, well, George Russell was catching very quickly. And it was Kimi Antonelli with his 5-second penalty from a, well, jump start, which, let's be fair, he didn't get a good start in the end, did he? Finishing 30 seconds behind. With that penalty, Charles Leclerc just shy of 0.2 off, 0.190 off of, in hindsight, getting a podium. But Kimi Antonelli, I mean, he ended up winning, where Verstappen won driver of the race. I was really surprised. In spite of Kimi's penalty, he started from way back in the late teens, ended up finishing, in hindsight, 3rd, which I think absolutely trumps anything Verstappen did, although Verstappen did drive a very solid race. But at no point really after lap 10 was he under pressure. Then it was Charles Leclerc in 4th, about 30.6 seconds behind. Carlos Sainz in 5th, 34.9, starting 3rd. I mean, bear in mind, you add the 2 McLarens in, I think you'll be disappointed. Isaac Hadjar, 6th. 45 seconds behind. Nico Hülkenberg in the points, 51.1. Lewis Hamilton, initially 10th and now 8th. I still don't think that will make him happy. He pretty much said, yeah, this is like the worst season of my life. We intend to agree. He ended up being 59.3 seconds behind, 30 seconds behind his teammate, although he did start 19th. Yuki Tsunoda would have started 19th, but he ended up starting in the pit lane. Didn't really help him much, did it? So it was Esteban Ocon in 9th, Oliver Behrman in 10th. Well done. Haas again scoring points. Then Fernando Alonso just missing out in 11th, 86 seconds down. Right behind Fernando Alonso was Yuki Tsunoda in the car that won. Yeah, that's not the same car, is it? At least if it's not the same car, it's definitely a car that Yuki Tsunoda cannot drive. He is no Muppet, so to speak, nor is Liam Lawson, nor Sergio Perez, but I must start a record now when it comes to the fact that that is a Max Verstappen bespoke car, and why not? So would I if I was Red Bull if Max Verstappen was doing those results. But I'm just saying. So it was Pierre Gasly in 13th, Liam Lawson in 14th, Franco Colapinto last of the runners, a lap down along with Liam. Liam having a bit of an issue at the start, along with Gabriel Bortoleto. I mean, yeah, his start was absolutely ridiculous. If you have ever been on any F1 lobby in the game, Gabriel Bortoleto was that person in the lobby in the game that ruins it for everyone at the first corner. Yeah, long darted. I mean, brakes. Alex Albon also retired. He hit Lewis Hamilton, very much like what Lewis Hamilton did, I think, to Colapinto in Brazil. Just misjudged it wrong, essentially breaking his front wing. Luckily, no puncture for Lewis. No big accident for Alex Albon, but still. And obviously, Lando Norris, Lance Stroll obviously last as well. A DNF, did not finish at the beginning. It can't really classify him, didn't he? It wasn't really his fault, though. Well done for not being your fault, Lance. So, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, destroyed by their plank, disqualified. So this is now the point situation. After McLaren's disqualification, Lando Norris on 390, Piastri and Verstappen on 366, although Piastri is just ahead on countback. What are McLaren going to do now? No team orders, obviously. Piastri can still win. The only saving grace is Yuki Tsunoda is currently so rubbish in that car that he's probably not going to be able to help Max Verstappen. But Piastri and Norris are probably going to help Max Verstappen by fighting amongst each other. However, Lando Norris can still win the championship in Qatar. All he's got to do is beat those two. I say all he's got to do. It's going to be an interesting measure, isn't it? There'll be a bit more pressure on. We're definitely going to see the real Lando Norris come out. Now, can he maintain the pressure? Will we see choke Norris or Lando Norris in Qatar? If Lando Norris in Qatar wins the World Championship without a bout of pressure, driver of the year, as far as I'm concerned, because, yeah, he has been through the ring, hasn't he? And so is Piastri. And there's Verstappen with, really, let's be fair, nothing to lose. So this is your current driver standings after all the DQs, etc. So Norris 390, Piastri on 366, along with Verstappen. Then George Russell can no longer win, but 294 points. Yeah, that's no big news though. Leclerc on 226, Hamilton on 152 in 6th, Antonelli on 137. Can he catch Lewis on his current form? Maybe. Alex Albon on 8th on 73, Hadjar in 9th on 51, and Hulkenberg in 10th. Is he going to keep that top 10 on 49 points? I guess we're going to have to see here. Now, what I found interesting here is this is Verstappen's deficit to Piastri. We have if it goes from 104 to 0, 104, and that was at the Netherlands, you know, his home Grand. That was at his home Grand Prix, and then we had Italy 94, and it just starts to get smaller and smaller. Baku 69, Singapore 63, the USA it was down to 40, and then after the USA we had Mexico down to 36, Brazil down to 25, and now 0. Oh dear! I mean, he had 104 points lead, Piastri did, to Verstappen. This season is going to be absolutely analysed, I think, by the experts and all alike, particularly if McLaren end up losing and Max Verstappen ends up winning. It'll be an absolute travesty, but McLaren have done it before in 2007. So McLaren's record since they returned to Vegas, though, now with this DQ, it would have been the best result. But now no wins, no poles, no podiums, 1 DNF, 2 disqualifications, and 17 points over 3 weekends in Las Vegas. An absolute nightmare. Yep, Andrea Stella, look, you can tell there's tears there behind that mask. Poor Andrea. So 2025, this was quite interesting by the holiness. Big F1 data guy. 2025 was the first time in history that Ferrari suffered a double disqualification. Also, 2025 was the first time in history that McLaren suffered a disqualification. If you remember, this was all the way back in the Chinese Grand Prix with Gasly, Hamilton and Leclerc. Disqualified Gasly and Leclerc, I think, due down to their plank wear, which is exactly the same. It's an epidemic, isn't it, this year, where both McLaren drivers, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri were disqualified because of their plank wear. Absolutely right too. They should have been disqualified. It's the rules. Hello, George Russell, Belgium Grand Prix last year. So, this one was the sparking. Was it because of this? This was, I think, Piastri overtaking, I think it was Isaac Hadjar. Yeah, pretty sure it was. And look at the sparks. We didn't see as many sparks from Norris, but definitely from Piastri was it moments like that. Now, this is the official FIA document. This is Piastri's one. The thickness of the plank assembly was below the permitted minimum thickness, and that's a breach of Article 3.5.9. Nerdy stuff. So, car 81 disqualified. All other drivers move up in classification. The stewards heard from the team principal, sporting director, and technical director from the McLaren Formula 1 team, the FIA single-seater director, the FIA single-seater technical director, and an FIA delegate. Now, the rear skids of car 81 were measured and found to be below the minimum. And that's obviously a breach of the article. The relevant measurements, front was 8.88 millimetres, remember they've got to be 9, and the rear was 8.93 millimetres, clearly giving them a 10-second a lap advantage. No, the advantage would have been absolutely minimal, but these are the rules. The measuring device was a Mitsuo 2 micrometer purchased in May 25 apparently, and according to the manufacturer's specifications, accurate to within 0.001 millimetres. So, DQ. The team, though, they did argue that mitigating circumstances, I think this was just clutching at straws at this rate, existed in that there were additional and unexpected porpoising at the event, yes, limited opportunity to test due to the weather on day one, yes, and shortened practice sessions. Further, the team submitted that the degree of the breach was lower than prior breaches in the regulation in 2020 this year. Probably having a look at Ferrari. The FIA argued that unfortunately no provision in the regulations can set a precedent for this penalty, therefore they're disqualified. I wish the FIA were as clear as that on other things. That would be lovely, wouldn't it? But there we go. They got it right. And the same with Lando Norris, absolutely. His measurements, though, slightly the relevant 8.88 and 8.93 again, the measuring device again. And they argued about the practice sessions. Yeah, it was unintentional, obviously, but that's not going to change anything. They're disqualified. Max Verstappen is now within 24 points of the championship. That's still a lot. We've got 2 races to go. He's just 1 point under a race win away. However, as we know, things can unravel very quickly in Formula 1. Could Max Verstappen be the F1 2025 World Champion? It would be a massive feat. And I think this way, whoever wins the championship is going to be Driver of the Year, in my opinion. Max has been driving fantastic. But I think people absolutely underestimate how good that Red Bull is. I keep saying, it is designed, start record, it is designed for Max Verstappen. That's why it is so good in Max Verstappen's hand. Just look at the other driver. I think the McLaren is just as fast as well. And I think whoever wins it from this point absolutely deserves it. Unless we have any funny business with a certain Michael Massey. And this was obviously the start. I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to play it all. But as you can see here, Lando Norris ends up coming over to Max Verstappen there. I mean, you can see that he's absolutely all over Max Verstappen. He's like, I'm gonna chop you up. But then Max Verstappen later on, he's like, no, it's not happening. And as you can see, Max Verstappen then goes to the side. Lando Norris sticks on the inside, and on the inside is where it's dusty, it's kind of greasy offline as well. And Lando, I just think, not only outbraked himself, I think he outcalculated himself. Even David Coulthard came out and said you can't Max Verstappen. And as you can see here, Lando Norris is already going wide after trying to outbrake Max Verstappen. Yeah, sad times. It's pretty much over. But that wasn't as bad as this man here. It is, this is long dart Gabriel Bortoleto, who, okay, he's coming up now. We're coming up to the braking zone, Gabriel. Be very careful. Brake nice and early. Don't do anything you shouldn't do. Oh, dear. Oh, dear, indeed. Yeah. So, I mean, what was Gabriel Bortoleto thinking? Absolutely. A whole host of oh dears there. But let's move on now to our F1 data. Vegas Grand Prix explain. This was the race pace. Max Verstappen, the best, obviously, on that race pace. Lando Norris, I think his race pace was going to be a bit askew, only because his last few laps were so slow. He went from like 5-6 seconds behind Max Verstappen, and they were swapping basically fastest laps, to being 23 seconds behind Max Verstappen. But interestingly, it was Oscar Piastri that was the next fastest car. Now, how much of that is going to be their wearing planks? I think it's going to be minimal, if I'm honest. But still, they broke the rules. Now, the third fastest car was Charles Leclerc, even though he finished behind both Mercedes. But I think he had a fairly, decent race pace. When you look at Russell, he was arguably the most consistent with his race pace. And sadly, it was George Russell whose steering went kaput after lap 10, 11, when then he started to fall back from Max Verstappen. He was quite upset. Who knows? Maybe in another universe, had that not gone kaput, he was able to really keep up with Max. And there's a world where George Russell is the Las Vegas Grand Prix winner for a second year in a row. But alas, that didn't happen. And George Russell, kept it there. But Kimi Antonelli, absolutely amazing. This guy, it was such a legendary drive on tyres that were so old. What he pitted them, near the beginning of the race under the virtual safety car. He's like, I'm going to put these hards on and absolutely send it to the end. And that's what he did. Brilliant. Carlos Sainz, it was kind of like all over the place in terms of that when you actually look at his race pace compared to the others. And then you had Isaac Hadjar and Hulkenberg, where fairly similar. Lewis Hamilton, similar-ish when you look to Leclerc at times. But what was funny about Lewis, the minute he put the mediums on, for whatever reason, they didn't work. Now, he put the mediums on a few laps after Alex Albon yeeted him in the backside. And I'm wondering, did that damage his Ferrari? We haven't really heard much of Ferrari because all we've heard is about this DQ, etc. So there we go. And the slowest, sadly, Gasly and Colapinto, but Gasly at least consistent. Colapinto all over the place, faster than Gasly, and very, very much slower than Gasly. Now here were the tyre strategies. Very, 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 very similar. Max Verstappen, half and half medium, half hards. Yeah, he had the race under control pretty much from lap 10. You know, the minute George Russell started to go wrong. Norris pitting on lap 22, Russell on lap 17. But this is it. Kimi Antonelli pitting on lap 2. Those soft tyres not doing particularly well. He pitted obviously really early and then went to the end. Pretty much 48 laps, wasn't it? 47, 48 laps on those hard tyres. Insane. So Piastri pitting on lap 21, Leclerc on lap 24. I mean, most of these people, it was, you know, halfway through. And then you had the people starting on hards. Hamilton had a really good start. He just avoided the chaos like the sea parting from Moses and went straight up to 12th. But then he kind of crescendoed behind, what was it, Ocon. He got past Ocon in the end, and then he just couldn't get past his nemesis for the podium at Silverstone, which was Hülkenberg. And he pitted on lap 29, Hülkenberg the lap after. But from being quite close to Hülkenberg, he lost like 6-7 seconds. And to this day, I don't really know how that happened when all the pit stops sorted themselves out. He must have been so slow. And then we had Ocon pitting on lap 27. Tsunoda, what was interesting, he pitted on lap 1 for the hards, then lap 27 for what was used mediums to the end. But let's be fair, Red Bull don't care about Tsunoda, do they? He's just there to drive the other car, which is not particularly great. So this was the average gap for Verstappen. This is how much he was in control. I mean, Norris ended up being, 4/10 slower on average to Max. Thanks again, I think, to those very last laps, which were seconds off Max Verstappen. I think he would have been a lot closer had it not been for his fuel. But then, I know, he got disqualified. Piastri, not too bad as well. But the next non-disqualified car was nearly half a second slower than Max, and that was Leclerc. Yeah, he was in a bit of traffic, but still. Then we had Antonelli and Russell, half a second slower. Antonelli coming through on those, let's be fair, very much used tyres at the end, but still very fast. And George Russell was really nursing that power steering, that steering problem that had pretty much plagued him from the beginning of the weekend, at least in qualifying. That stopped him, arguably, fighting for pole position on his last quali lap. Sainz again 6/10 down, Isaac Hadjar about 8/10 down, and we will go all the way to Colapinto 2 seconds down, consistently about 3/10 slower than his teammate. Not too bad. Alonso 1.7. That's really going to upset him, isn't it? On a track where in the wet they looked really good, 1.7 seconds down. But this is the last, I think, of these low grip circuits as we now go to the desert, which is going to be very, very interesting. This was obviously the standings. Verstappen pretty much leading from start to finish. Obviously not getting pole, so not getting the coup de grace, the all-tick box. And yeah, Lando ended up passing George Russell for second, ultimately being disqualified. It was quite an easy pass. George Russell was just absolutely finished, wasn't he? Sadly. So this was the pit time. So who had the best pit stop at the Las Vegas Grand Prix? Well, it was Aston Martin. McLaren second, Ferrari and Red Bull quite close. Verstappen didn't have the best, I think it was like 3.1 seconds. For Red Bull, it's nearly always a sub 3 second stop, about 2.5, isn't it? But this is 21 seconds. Now, remember, this measures obviously from pit entry to pit exit. So the drivers can make a difference along with the mechanics on how much they nail that pit, that pit entry. I don't exactly know exactly when it starts, but yes, Sauber 27 seconds, Williams 26. I think that would be sorting out the front wing or something. And 25 seconds, not that great for VCARB. Everyone else, around the 21 second mark, 22 second mark. So now this was top speed. This is always very interesting. Verstappen, because I believe he had absolutely no DRS being out in front, 340. This is kilometers per hour. The fastest was Ollie Behrman, obviously. He would have had those nice slipstreams down those long straights of Las Vegas, along with DRS, our drag reduction system, and Hamilton as well on 364. And Ocon on 363. Now the top three speeds, all Ferrari engines as well. Is that saying something? I don't know. Because also Lewis Hamilton, he did have, unless they changed it, I believe he had more downforce on his rear wing than Charles Leclerc, but Charles Leclerc 355, who would have had DRS as well. So that's quite interesting. And that's like, over 10 kilometers per hour, well, nearly 9 between him and Charles Leclerc difference. Both the McLarens average again 358, 357. It seems that their car is not as draggy as it was 7 or 8 races ago. Very much in the middle now. How many times have we seen that McLaren are one of the slowest in a straight line, albeit they weren't leading, were they? They were in the mix along with Lando, Norris and and Oscar Piastri. So there we go. This is obviously the average Las Vegas lap times. But moving on from there, if you want the average pace, we've seen it here again. You know, very similar there. In terms of the fastest car being Red Bull, then McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, Williams, Racing Bulls, Kick Sauber, Haas, Alpine, and the slowest here they've got Aston Martin, which is interesting. But there we go. But that's pretty much your F1 Las Vegas big data. And now we're going to get into our driver ratings. So, welcome to our driver ratings for the 2025 Las Vegas Grand Prix. Who's going to be last? Well, I think by default, we're going to have to put these two last. First of all, Lando Norris, along with his teammate, Oscar Piastri, simply because they got disqualified. They had an illegal car. Thank you very much. There's not much we can really do there. Had Norris finished, I probably would have put him about second, probably third, potentially. But alas, it didn't happen. Oscar Piastri, again, having a bit of a disastrous weekend. But because of that disqualification, it does him a favour. He doesn't lose points to Lando Norris. So next up, we've got Gabriel Bortoleto, who So this is the first proper of the losers. I'm not counting McLaren because they got disqualified. But when you yeet it, long dart it, F1 lobby it into the pack at the beginning of the race, you deserve to be pretty much last of the losers. Well done, Gabriel Bortoleto. Oh dear. And also a pretty of a bad weekend as well for Liam Lawson, bashing into Oscar Piastri. Not particularly great after what could have been quite a good weekend for him. We said, for Liam Lawson, if you do 3 good weekends in a row, you may well save your career. That could still be the case, but I think now we're going to have to start crossing our fingers. Stuff is going to be written about Alexander Albon and the second half of the 2025 season. I mean, luckily, he's in the top 10. I don't think Carlos Sainz is going to beat him, at least not with only 2 races to go. He retired. He's just from crashing in qualifying to then in the race hitting the back of Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, a miscalculation, but mistakes are happening too much. We saw it last year with Alex Albon when Franco Colapinto was putting him under pressure, and he needs to sort it out. I said, not a great weekend, not a great race for Alex Albon. Lance Stroll, I'm putting him above. He didn't really make a mistake. He just went off at the first corner, got hit, and that was pretty much his race over. But someone who did race, pitted, started from the pit lane, and then didn't do much of nothing, did he? Despite the fact that your teammate won the race. He started last. When you look at it, Kimi Antonelli finished third. Once again, there is that question mark about Red Bull's second car, but still, yeah. Surely we're seeing, sadly, at least the last of Tsunoda in a Red Bull. Colapinto is next. Simply, he's there. Yes, he was the last of the runners, but he didn't embarrass himself by doing too many silly things. Along with Pierre Gasly as well, who finished 13th. 15th and 13th for both Pierre Gasly and Colapinto. They're in an Alpine, which I still think is ultimately the worst car, really. The man who finished 11th, Fernando Alonso, a good driver. I don't know what more he really could have done. Yeah. So we're into our top 10 now. And Ollie Behrman, again, a solid weekend for Oliver Behrman. No big mistakes, but he was beaten by his teammate Esteban Ocon, who finishes ahead of him. Well done, Esteban Ocon. You didn't do too bad. You did good, but you didn't do as good as the man in green, Hulkenberg. Yeah, more points for Sauber in 7th, which was, not too bad at all. But I have put Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, he couldn't quite beat Hulkenberg, but bear in mind he started last. He was struggling with the medium tyre. He did a really solid stint. I think he deserves to finish one above Hulkenberg. I'm not trying to. I don't think we're being biased there for whatever. But yeah, fair play, Lewis Hamilton. Next up, we've got Isaac Hadjar, ultimately finished 6th. But yeah, he was under pressure from Liam Lawson this weekend, wasn't he? But he didn't yeet it into anyone at the start. And there he was. Next up, we've got Carlos Sainz, who started third. Could have been a podium. You gotta start to think maybe with the 2 McLarens being disqualified, there was hope. But let's be fair, it was only Charles Leclerc, Kimi, George Russell, and Max Verstappen after the McLarens were DQ'd that ended up finishing ahead of him. So I think the qualifying was a bit of a lottery. He got third in those conditions. Well done. I don't think he really could have done much more. He was kind of helpless, I think, as this man, Charles Leclerc, passed him, who finished 4th. And he's just outside our podium because he's finishing 4th in our driver ratings as well. So yeah, I want to say, an average race for Charles Leclerc. Not bad, not amazingly great either. Not inspired, solid. And even Leclerc said, I think I did a really good job. So next up we got George Russell, who's third. On the road he was in second. I think he did a really good job, especially holding that steering. But he did get some help, I think. People were holding... there was a certain teammate that's holding him up. We'll get into his teammate in a minute. Because this guy, yes, he was driver of the race. He was voted. Let's be fair. That's just as much of a popularity contest half the time as well. You can make an argument for Verstappen being driver of the race, absolutely. But yeah, he led from the front, bit of pressure by George Russell, and that's pretty much it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's never easy leading a race like Max Verstappen did in winning it. But I think further back, there was one in particular, a much better driver looming. And that was in spite of his penalty. And that is why Kimi Antonelli is our driver of the race at Las Vegas. Well done, Kimi Antonelli. You are amazing. Absolutely. To drive from way back on the grid to finish in third place on tyres that were pretty much a race distance old. I mean, there was a couple of times that he was, side by side, I believe, with Charles Leclerc, but he resisted Charles Leclerc, finishing what we know now after the DQ in third. Well done, Kimi Antonelli. Absolutely amazing. It really was. I mean, fantastic. So, there we go. Now, onwards to Qatar, where, yeah, in spite of this massive setback by McLaren, where Max Verstappen is now 24 points, within 24 points of the championship, Lando Norris can still get it done. It is up to Lando Norris to get it done. It absolutely is. But until then, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much. And as I'm trying not to burp, above all else, stay safe. This is where I always press the wrong button. Here we go. Here's the outro. Hey!